संसारदावा नललिधलोका त्रणयकारुण्य घना घना त्वं
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 प्राप्तस्य कल्याण गुणनवस्य वन्दे गुरु श्री चरणारविन्दम्
गुरुनवस्य वन्दे गुरु श्री चरणारविन्दम्
महाप्रभु की तन नृत्य गीता वादित्रमाद्यान् मनसोरसेन
महाप्रभु कीर्तन गीत वादित्रमाद्यान् मनसोरसेन
रोमाञ्चकं पासुतरङ्गभाजो वन्दे गुरु श्री चरणारविन्दम्
रोमाञ्चकं पासुतरङ्गभाजो वन्दे गुरु श्री चरणारविन्दम् श्रीविग्रहाराधन नित्यनाना शृङ्गारतन्मन्दिरमर्जनादो श्रीविग्रहाराधन नित्यनाना शृङ्गारतन्मन्दिरमर्जनादो
युक्तश्च भक्तां च निञ्जतोऽपि वन्दे गुरु श्री चरणारविन्दम्
युक्तस्य भक्तं सनियुञ्जतोऽपि वन्दे गुरु श्री चरणारविन्दम्
चतुर्विधा श्री भगवत्प्रसादो स्वादन्नतृप्तां हरिभक्तसङ्घा
चतुर्विधा श्री भगवत्प्रसादो स्वादन्नतृप्तां हरिभक्तसङ्घा
कृत्वैव तृप्तिं भजत सदैव वन्दे गुरु श्री चरणारविन्दम् कृत्वैव
तृप्तिं भजत सदैव वन्दे गुरु श्री चरणारविन्दम्
श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपार माधुर्यलीला गुणरूपनाम्ना
श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपार माधुर्यलीला गुणरूपनाम्ना
श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपार भागवत एव साध्वी किन्तु प्रभूय प्रिय एव तस्यै वन्दे गुरु श्री चरणारविन्दम्
किन्तु प्रभूय प्रिय एव तस्यै वन्दे गुरु श्री चरणारविन्दम्
यस्य प्रसादा भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादा न गति कुतोऽपि
यस्य प्रसादा भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादा न गति कुतोऽपि
यस्य प्रसादा भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादा न गति कुतोऽपि
यस्य प्रसादा भगवत्प्रसादा यस्य प्रसादा न गति कुतोऽपि
ध्यायन्तु वांस्तस्य यशस्त्रीसन्धान् वन्दे गुरु श्री चरणारविन्दम्
ध्यायन्तु वांस्तस्य यशस्त्रीसन्धान् वन्दे गुरु श्री चरणारविन्दम्
संसारदावा न ललितलोका प्रणय कारुण्य घना घनात्मम् प्राप्तस्य कल्याण गुणनवस्य वन्दे गुरु श्री चरणारविन्दम्
प्राप्तस्य कल्याण गुणनवस्य वन्दे गुरु श्री चरणारविन्दम्
वन्दे गुरु श्री चरणारविन्दम् 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 वन्दे गुरु श्री चरणारविन्दम्
नामो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदान्त स्वामीति नामिने नामो
पदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय श्रीमते
भक्ति
वेदान्त
नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशकारिणे
नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौर
गदाधर शिवशादि गौरा भक्तवृंदा। जय श्री कृष्ण
चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवशादि गौरा भक्तवृंदा।
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे।
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे।
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे।
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama,
राम राम हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे।
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama,
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे।
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
जय राधा नील माधव राधे,
Jai Radha, Nila Madhava, Nila Madhava,
जय जगन्नाथ जय बलदेवा जय सुभद्रा।
Jai Jagannath, Jai Jagannath.
सीताराम जय हनुमान जय
सीताराम जय सीताराम जय सीताराम जय सीताराम
निताय गौरांग निताय गौरांग निताय गौरांग गौर हरे
निताय गौरांग निताय गौरांग निताय गौरांग जय गौर हरे
निताय गौर हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल
निताय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि Jai Vishnu Pahar Paramahansa Prabhupada Acharya Sutra Sarashishi Maharaj Divine Grace Abhay Charvina Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Pratishta Viviti Samstapaka Acharya Vaishnav Siromani Patita Pavan Srila Prabhupada Ji Maharaj Ki Jai Shri Gaurya Guru Varga Patitu Dhari Ki Jai Shri Rup Sanatan Bhakta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopal Bhakta Dasa Gunasat Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai नामाचार्य शील हरिदास ठाकुर जी की जय अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिव सरि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय जय परम दयाल श्री नित्यानंद प्रभु की जय प्रेम नाम संकीर्तन एक जनाक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सच्चिदानंद श्री गौरंग श्री चैतन्य महाप्रभु गौर हरि मावरनाय अवतार की जय गोलोकीर प्रमधानी नाम संकीर्तन जय की जय जुग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय Brihap Nidanga Transcendental Book Distribution Seva Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopna Radha Kund Syama Kund Giriraj Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Brajabhum Vrindavan Mathur Dham Ki Jai The Lordship Shri Shri Radha Nila Madhava Ki Jai Shri Mayapur Navadvip Eka Chakra Dham Ki Jai Parama Karuna Shri Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Jai Shri Purushottama Kitra Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Shri Jagannath Swami Baladev Prabhu Smasmadra Devi Sudarshan Chakra Bhagavan Ki Jai भक्ति सर्व विघ्न विनाशन कर्ण श्रृंगारी भगवान की जय सीताराम लक्ष्मण भक्त हनुमान जी की जय जगंगा मय जमुना माई की जय तुलसी महारानी प्रेमी देवी भक्ति देवी की जय श्री मथुराधारानी की जय समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय निताय गौरी प्रमानंदे all glory to the Sambal Boris, all glory to the Sambal Boris, all glory to the Sambal Boris. All glories, all glories, all glory to Shri Shri Guru Shri Gauranga.
Namaste Narsimhaya
Namaste Narsimhaya
Praglada Lada Dahine Hiranyakashi Purvakshaha Shilantanka Nakalaye
Silatanka Nakalaye
Ito Narsimha Parato Narsimha
Ito Nisingha Parato Nisingha
Yato Yato Yamitato Narsimha
Jaya Jatta Jatta Jatta
Hare Narsimha Hirdaye Narsimha Narasimhamadiim Saranam Prapate.
Narasimhamadiim Saranam Prapate.
Tava Kara Kamala Vare Nakam Abhuta Shingha Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringa Keshavatirtha Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Tava Kara Kamala Vare Nakam Abhuta Shingha Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanubringa Kesavatirtha Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Kesavatirtha Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare
Jaya
Kesavatirtha Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jayo Narasimhade Jayo Narasimhade Jayo Narasimhade Jayo Narasimhade
Jaya Narasimhade Narasimhade Narasimhade
Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj
Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Prahlad Maharaj Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada
Nrsimhadev Bhagwan ki jai Prahlad Maharaj ki jai
Jai Shri Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namo Namaha Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namo Namaha Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Satavatai Namo Namaha Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki
Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namah.
Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namo.
Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namah.
Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namo.
Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Eya Vilasi.
Radha Krishna Seva Prabhu Eya Vilasi.
Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Eya Vilasi.
Radha Krishna Seva Prabhu Eya Vilasi.
Jetomara Sharanaloy Tara Vancha Purnahoy
Tomara Sharanana Taravancha Purna.
Kripa Kori Koro Tare Vrindavanavasi.
Tume kripa kare karakara Vrindavanavasi.
Moraye Vilas Vilas Kunjeri Ava.
Moraya Vilas Kunde Niyava.
Nayane Ibo Sada Jugala Ruparasi.
Aminayane Rivasana Jugana Parasi.
Eini Vedana Daro Sakir Anugata Koro.
Aini Vedanaga Sakiraya no Gatako.
Seva Dikara Diye Koro Nijadasi.
Sevayade Karadiye Karaniyadasi.
Dina Krishna Dasi Koye Namoyoy.
Dina Krishna Das Koye Namora.
Shri Radha Govinda Premi Sadaye Nabasi.
Radha Govinda Premi Sadaye Nabasi.
Shri Radha Govinda Premi Sadaye Nabasi.
Sri Radha Govinda Premi Sadaye Nabasi.
Yani Kani Chapapani Brahma Jati Kani Cha Tani Tani Prana Shanti Pradakshina Pade Pade.
Janikani Sapapani Brahmayatani Kanisa Tani Tani Pranasanti
Yani Kani Chapapani Brahma Jati Kani Cha Tani Tani Prana Shanti Pradakshina Pade Pade.
Janikani Sapapani Brahmayatani Kanisa Tani Tani Pranasanti Pradakshina Pade Pade.
cha papani brahmatyati kani cha tani tani pranashanti pradakshina pade pade. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo.
Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo. Shri Vrindaye Tulasi Vai Priyaye Krishna Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Sattvattaye Vrindaye Tulasi Vai Priyaye Krishna Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Sattvattaye Vrindaye Tulasi Devaye Priyaye Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Sattvattaye Srimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Oh Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you, his wishes fulfilled. Bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident over in Vrindavan. My desire is that you also give me a residence in pleasure groves of Shri Vrindavan Dham. Thus within my vision, I would always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower, carry temples of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maid servant. Please very fallen and lowly servant Krishna. May I always sing in love, Shishi, Radha, Bo, Tulasi Maharani, Vrindadi. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Satam Ki Jai. Teto Narayanam Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvahanam Shri Yakakai Vacham Kripa
Narapi Sunichena Karorapi Sahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sada Hari Nadanam Najanam Nasundarim Kavitam Vajagadisha Kamari Mama Janmani Janmanishware Avatar Bhakti Rahetu Ki Twai Ainandatam Jakingaram Patitam Vavishame Bhavamudhav Kripaya Tavapada Pankajastita Duri Sadrisham Yindaya Nayanam Galadashuraya Vadamanamita Gaduraya Hira Kulakir Nichitam Bahu Kada Kavanam Grame Bhavishyati Gaitam Dimeshena Chakshasha Pravisaitam Sunyakitam Jagat-sarvam Govindavirahena me Ashishya Bhadaram Vinastunam Adashanam Marmanam Prabhava Yatharthavam Yathatunam Pato Matranam Astusayivanam Prada Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama
Hare Hare. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sri Kestakam Ki Jai. Namo Mahabharanaya Krishna Pradayati. Glory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of what the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan moment is the primary benediction for humanity at large. God is praised the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. O my Lord, your holy names alone can render all benediction to living beings. And thus you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have invested all transcendental energies. There is no even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names. But I'm so unfortunate I have no attraction for them. Once we chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself Lord and strong in the street, one should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causal devotional service, birth after birth. O son of Maharajananda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I'm falling in social birth and death. Please pick me up from this social death and place me at the arms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, with my eyes will be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name. Or will my voice choke up? Or will the hairs on my body stand on the end of the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I'm considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I feel all vacant in the world in your absence. I don't know one but Krishna is my Lord, and he should remain so, even if sandals in rough ways embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Shri Shri Kastakam Ki Jai. There are 10 offenses in the matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that must be avoided. They are as follows. 1. Blasphemy before his dedicated life, propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. Consider the names of demigods, the Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma to be equal to or independent of the name Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4. Blaspheme the Vedic literature or literatures of assumes the Vedic version. 5. So the glory of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. Give some interpretation of the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name of the Lord. 8. Consider the chanting of Hare Krishna in front of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are Vedas spiritual activity, karma kanda. 9. To instruct the frivolous person by the glories of holy name. And 10. To not have complete faith in the chanting of holy names, to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions in this matter. It also on the fence being attentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to Vaishnava must carefully guide against the stand Francis in order to quickly achieve desire success. Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our respectful blessings unto all the Vaishnavas supposed to the Lord. They are just our desired trees, they can fulfill the desire for everyone, and therefore with compassion for the following conditions. So,
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraja Ki Jai. Janmadya Shayato Naviyati Taratas Chate Swavigyaswarat. Tene Brahma Hirdaya Adikavaye Muyanti Atsurya. Tejo Varimadam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mirsha Damna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dimahi. O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
I offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
I offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth.
And the primeval cause of all causes.
And the primeval cause of all causes.
Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
It is he only who first imparted Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji.
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge into the heart of Brahmaji.
The original living
the
being.
Original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
As one is bewildered by the illusory representation.
As one is bewildered by the illusory representation.
Of water seen on fire or land seen on water.
Of water seen on fire or land seen on water.
Only because of him do the material universes.
It's only because of him do the material universes.
Temporarily manifested by the reaction to the three modes of nature.
Temporarily manifested by the reaction to the three modes of nature.
Appear factual, although they are unreal.
Appear factual, although they are unreal.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna.
Who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode.
Who is eternally existent in the transcendental
which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world.
Forever free from the illusory representation of the material world.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
Dharma projita kaitravatra.
Dharma projita kaitravatra.
Paramo nirmatsranam satam.
Paramo nirmatsranam.
Vedyam vastavam achavastu.
Vedyam vastavam achavastu.
Shivadam tapa trayon mulanam.
Shivadam tapa trayon mulanam.
Shrimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite.
Shrimad Bhagavate Mahamuni.
Kim va parir ishvaraha.
Kim va parir ishvaraha.
Sadyo hridi avarudyate tra.
Sadyo hridi avarudyate tra.
Kritebihi sususabhistakshana.
Completely
rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth.
This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth.
Which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
Which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
Their reality is distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
Such truth uproots the threefold miseries.
Such truth uproots the threefold miseries.
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity.
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity.
Is sufficient in itself for God realization.
Sufficient in itself for God realization.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the need of any other scripture?
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam.
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam.
By this culture of knowledge.
By this culture of knowledge.
The Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam.
Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam.
Sukhamukad amrita dravya samyatam.
Sukhamukad amrita dravya samyatam.
Pibata Bhagavatam Rasam Alayam.
Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamane.
Muhur Aho Raskabu Vibhavakaha.
Ora Hora Sika Vivabuka.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam.
The mature fruit of the desire to Vedic literatures.
The mature fruit that desire to Vedic
It
literature.
emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
It emanated from the lips of Shishubhadev Goswami.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this food has become even more tasteful.
Although its nectarian juice is already relishable for all,
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
including liberated souls.
including liberated souls.
Sindvatam Swakata Krishna.
Sambhatam Swakata Krishna.
Punya Shravana Kirtana.
Punya Shravana
Hridyantaksto hi abhadrani.
Kirtana.
Vidunati Suhitsatam.
Vidunati Suhitsatam.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
We hear about Krishna from the Vedic
or
literature,
to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
or to hear from it directly from
is itself righteous activity.
Is this self-righteous activity?
And for one who hears about Krishna,
For one who hears about Krishna,
Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart,
Lord Krishna is dwelling within everyone's
acts as a best wishing friend,
heart, acts as the best wish
and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
and purifies the voice of constantly engaging hearing.
Nastapresu bhadresu
Nasta Praishwa Bhagaveshu
nityam bhagavata sevaya
Nityam Bhagavata Seva
bhagavati uttama sloke
Bhagavati Uttama Sloke
bhaktir bhavati naistaki.
Bhakti Bhagavati.
In this way, the devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
In this way, what naturally develop his transcendental.
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavad,
and from the devotees, he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
he becomes fixed in devotional service of the Lord.
Tadarajastamo bhava
Tarajastamo Bhava
kamalobhadayaschaye
Amalobhadaya
chita etayaranavidam
Chitaiteranavina
stitvam sattve prasidati.
Tam Sabe Prasida.
By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional service,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance,
one becomes free from the mode of passions,
and thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
and as material lust and avarice are diminished.
Evam prasana manaso
Evam prasana manasa
bhagavat bhakti yogataha
Bhagavad Bhakti Yoga
bhagavat tattva vijnanam
Bhagavad Tattva Vijnana
mukta sangasya jayate.
Mukta Sangha
When these impurities are wiped away,
When these impurities are wiped
the
away,
candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness,
the candidate remains steady,
becomes enlivened by devotional service,
becomes enlivened by devotion,
and understands the science of God perfectly.
and understands the signs of God perfectly.
Vidyate hridaya grantis
Vidyate Vidaya Granthi
chidyante sarvasamsaya
Siddhante Savasam
siyante chasya karmani
Siddhante Sachakarmani
justa evat manishware.
Evatmanishvari.
Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection
Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection.
and enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram,
And enables to come at once to the stage of Samsham Samadram.
understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, understanding of the Supreme Absolute Truth Personality of Godhead.
Understanding the supreme absolute true personality of God.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness
can one understand the science of Krishna.
can one understand the science of Krishna.
Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 1, Text number 6. Etavan Sankhya Yogabhyam
Itavan Sankhya Yogadyam
Swadharma Parinistaya
Swadharma Parinishtaya
Janmalabha Param Parapumsam
Janmalabha Parakumsa
Ante Narayana Smriti.
Ante Narayana Smriti.
The highest perfection of human life achieved, a translation by Srila Prabhupada, the highest perfection of human life achieved either by complete knowledge of matter and spirit, by practice of mystic powers, or by perfect discharge of occupational duty, is to remember the personality of Godhead at the end of life. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Narayana is the transcendental personality of Godhead beyond the material creation. Everything that is created, sustained, and at the end annihilated is within the compass of the Mahat Tattva, material principle. and is known as the material world. The existence of Narayana, or the personality of Godhead, is not within the jurisdiction of this Mahat Tattva. And as such, the name, form, attributes, etc. of Narayana are beyond the jurisdiction of the material world. By the speculation of empiric philosophy, which discerns matter from spirit, or by cultivation of mystic powers, which ultimately helps the performer to reach any planet of the universe or beyond the universe, or by discharge of religious duties, one can achieve the highest perfection, provided one is able to reach the stage of Narayana Smriti, or constant remembrance of the personality of Godhead. This is possible only by the association of a pure devotee, who can give a finishing touch to the transcendental activities of all jnanis, yogis, or karmis, in terms of prescribed duties defined in the scriptures. There are many historical instances of the achievement of spiritual perfection, such as that of Sanakadi Rishis, or the 9 celebrated Yogendras, who attained perfection only after being situated in the devotional service of the Lord. None of the devotees of the Lord ever deviated from the path of devotional service by taking to other methods as adopted by the jnanis or yogis. Everyone is anxious to achieve the highest perfection of his particular activity, and it is indicated herein that such perfection is Narayana Smriti, for which everyone must endeavor his best. In other words, life should be molded in such a manner that one is able to progressively remember the personality of Godhead in every step of life. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So this is a famous verse, especially that last line, Ante Narayana Smriti, which means at the end of one's life, one should always remember the personality of Godhead. Yeah. If we're thinking of Krishna at the end of life, we go back to Krishna Loka, where we came from. But if we're thinking of something else, that doesn't happen. So therefore, we must be practiced to think of Krishna. We can't think, oh, I'll be like Ajamil, last minute I'll just say Hare Krishna. It's not that easy. Because the last minute, you could be under sedation in a hospital. The last minute, you could be choked up or going blind in complete distress because you don't know who's going to get your money, who's going to get the house, who's going to get the car. There was one lady in Greece, and she became an invalid, so she depended on her neighbors to deal with her. I mean, they didn't have Social Security, they didn't have hired nurses and things like that at that time. She was living in a relatively smaller village, and you had to depend on your neighbors. And unfortunately, most of her relatives died before her. So she had some good neighbors, and she had one bad neighbor. She didn't know it was a bad neighbor, but it was a neighbor who was greedy. So when it was the bad neighbor's turn to come to her house, every time she would come and take care of her, feed her, clean the house, she would always take something from the house. So the lady was an invalid, and she couldn't see that much either. She could hear, she couldn't, she wasn't blind, but her eyesight was blurred. But one day she noticed, after a long time, all different people coming different days, that gradually her house was becoming empty. Whereas she had a lot of expensive furniture, china, table covers, tables, chairs, all kinds of things in her house, and some very expensive things. So then she began to be more careful to watch the ladies that would come to do the house cleaning. So there was 7 different ladies that would come. And finally she realized who was the thief. One of those ladies was a thief. The others also were noticing things, but they didn't say anything. So this put her in great anxiety because she couldn't even stand up. And if she said something, maybe the lady would not come anymore, and maybe other ladies wouldn't come. So she was stuck, and there was nothing she could do about it. And by the time she left her body, there was nothing left in the house except the 4 walls. So, do you think she was thinking of Jesus or Krishna at the moment of death? No. She was in deep anxiety, upset, because everything she had collected was ripped off by this dishonest neighbor. So her mind was fixated on the neighbor that was stealing from her. So you see, it's not a simple thing to, engage a whole life in sense gratification and then think that at the moment of death you're going to say Hare Krishna and go back to Godhead. No, it's not that easy. One has to be very sincere and practice their whole life, keep the mind focused on Krishna through practical devotional service, not theoretically by simply meditation. So therefore it says, Yam yam vapi smaram bhavam tiyachat ante kalevaram tam tami vaiti konte asadatat bhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. So the question is, how should we look at our life and the meaning of our life? So most people look at it like, oh, well, I was lucky to be born, and I was born in a decent, relatively good family, and they gave me a good education, I have a good job, and now I'm beginning to collect things, my own car, my own house, and a wife and children. And so this is the good life. I'm not a bad person. I don't do anything bad. I don't cheat. I don't lie. I live in a mode of goodness as much as possible. And, I'm perfectly satisfied. Well, that's not good enough. And today we're going to hear something very, very interesting of how the difference between pure love of Krishna and conditional love. And this subject is the main subject the Lord Chaitanya is teaching. But it doesn't get as clear, crystal clear, until we come, well, it's clear, but it doesn't get crystal clear until we come to Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adilila, 4th chapter, where Lord Chaitanya begins to explain the unparalleled pure devotion of the gopis. So, Lord Chaitanya is speaking, and he says, taking these pure devotees with me, I shall descend and sport in various wonderful ways, unknown even in Vaikuntha. I shall broadcast such pastimes by which even I am amazed. And Prabhupada says, Lord Krishna, in the form of Lord Chaitanya, educates his devotees to develop progressively to the stage of pure devotional service. Thus he appears periodically as a devotee to take part in various wonderful activities depicted in his sublime philosophy and teachings. There are innumerable Vaikuntha planets in the spiritual sky, and in all of them, the Lord accepts the service rendered by his eternal devotees in a reverential mood. Therefore, Lord Shri Krishna presents his most confidential pastimes as he enjoys them in his transcendental realm. Such pastimes are so attractive that they attract even the Lord, and thus he relishes them in the form of Lord Chaitanya. Well, see, that's the point. To relish something that you have, it's not the same as a person who loves you relishing what you have. So therefore, in order for Lord Chaitanya to understand what it is about himself, or Lord Krishna, to understand what it is about himself that is so attractive to others, he has to take their position. So he takes the position of Radharani, who is the most intensely relishing Krishna's pastimes and Krishna. And so he does that in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is a combination of Radha and Krishna. But he takes Radharani's position, number one, to appreciate the way she appreciates Krishna. Number two, to understand what those things are about himself that she is so attracted to. And number three, to experience her level of intense, unalloyed pleasure, or transcendental bliss. Not pleasure, but transcendental bliss when she's associating with him. Because he has seen already that she feels intensity of bliss more than he does. So the only way he can understand what it is about himself is to take her position. So then Lord Chaitanya continues, he says, the influence of Yogamaya will inspire the gopis with the sentiment that I am their paramour. And Prabhupada explains, Yogamaya is the name of the internal potency that makes the Lord forget himself and become an object of love for his pure devotee in different transcendental mellows. This Yogamaya potency creates a spiritual sentiment in the minds of the damsels of Vraja, meaning the gopis, by which they think of Lord Krishna as their paramour, their lover. This sentiment is never to be compared to mundane, illicit sexual love. It has nothing to do with sexual psychology, although the pure love of such devotees seems to be sexual. One should know for certain that nothing can exist in this cosmic manifestation that has no real counterpart in the spiritual field. All material manifestations are emanations of the transcendence. The erotic principles of amorous love reflected in mixed material values are perverted reflections of the reality of spirit. But one cannot understand the reality unless one is sufficiently educated in the spiritual science. So then Lord Chaitanya continues, he says, neither the gopis nor I shall notice this, for our minds will always be always be entranced by one another's beauty and qualities. So, this means in the spiritual sky, Prabhupada explains, the Vaikuntha planets are predominated by Narayana. His devotees have the same features he does. In other words, they have 4 arms, etc. And the exchange of devotion there is on a platform of reverence. But above all these Vaikuntha planets is Goloka, or Krishna Loka, where the original personality of Godhead, Krishna, fully manifests his pleasure potency in free loving affairs. Since the devotees in the material world know almost nothing about these affairs, the Lord desires to show these affairs to them. In Goloka Vrindavana, there is an exchange of love known as Parakya Rasa. It is something like the attraction of a married woman for a man other than her husband. In the material world, this sort of relationship is most abominable because it is a perverted reflection of the Parakriya Rasa in the spiritual world, where the same thing is the highest kind of loving affair. Such feelings between the devotee and the Lord are presented by the influence of Yogamaya. The Bhagavad Gita states that the devotees of the highest grade are under the care of Daiva Maya, or Yogamaya. Mahatmanas tumam partha daivim prakritim asritaha. Bhagavad Gita 9:13. Those who are actually great souls, Mahatmas, are fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, always engaged in the service of the Lord. They are under the care of Daivi Prakriti, or Yogamaya. Yogamaya creates a situation in which the devotee is prepared to transgress all regulative principles simply to love Krishna. A devotee naturally does not like to transgress the laws of reverence for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but by the influence of Yogamaya, he is prepared to do anything to love the Supreme Lord better. Those under the spell of the material energy cannot at all appreciate the activities of Yogamaya, for a conditioned soul can hardly understand the pure reciprocation between the Lord and his devotee. But by executing devotional service under the regulative principles, one can become very highly elevated and then begin to appreciate the dealings of pure love under the management of Yogamaya. In the spiritual loving sentiment induced by the Yogamaya potency, both Lord Shri Krishna and the damsels of Vraja forget themselves in spiritual rapture. By the influence of such forgetfulness, the attractive beauty of the gopis plays a prominent part in the transcendental satisfaction of the Lord, who has nothing to do with mundane sex. Because spiritual love of Godhead is above everything mundane, the gopis superficially seem to transgress the codes of mundane morality. This perpetually puzzles mundane moralists. Therefore, Yogamaya acts to cover the Lord and his pastimes from the eyes of mundaners, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7.25, where the Lord says that he reserves the right of not being exposed to everyone. The acts of Yogamaya make it possible for the Lord and the gopis, in loving ecstasy, to sometimes meet and sometimes separate. These transcendental loving affairs of the Lord are unimaginable to empiricists involved in the impersonal feature of the Absolute Truth. Therefore, the Lord himself appears before mundaners to bestow upon them the highest form of spiritual realization and also personally relish its essence. The Lord is so merciful that he himself descends to take the fallen souls back home to the kingdom of Godhead, where the erotic principles of Godhead are extremely relished in their real form, distinct from the perverted sexual love so much adored and indulged in by the fallen souls in their diseased condition. The reason the Lord displays the Rasa Lila is essentially to induce all the fallen souls to give up their diseased morality and religiosity, and to attract them to the kingdom of God, to enjoy the reality. A person who actually understands what the Rasa Lila is will certainly hate to indulge in mundane sex life. For the realized soul, hearing the Lord's Rasa Lila through the proper channel will result in complete abstinence from mundane sexual intercourse. Well, you see, this is a very special subject, and not everyone's capable of understanding it. And why is that? Well, this is also explained a little bit later on in the fourth chapter, when we come to verse 162, where it says the following. Yes, it says, the love of the gopis is called Rudra Bhava. It is pure and spotless. It is not at any time lust. As already Prabhupada explains, as already explained, the position of gopis in their loving dealings with Krishna is transcendental. Their emotion is called Rudra Bhava. Although it is apparently like mundane sex, one should not confuse it with mundane sexual love, for it is pure and unadulterated love of Godhead. 163, Prabhupada says, Krishna speaking, the pure love of the gopis has become celebrated by the name lust. The dear devotees of the Lord, headed by Sri Uddhava, desire to taste that love. This is a verse from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2.285. And the next verse. Lust and love have different characteristics, just as iron and gold have different natures. One should try to discriminate between sexual love and pure love, for they belong to different categories, with a gulf of difference between them. They are as different from one another as iron is from gold. Next verse. The desire to gratify one's own senses is kama, lust. But the desire to please the senses of Lord Krishna is prema, love. The revealed scriptures describe pure love as follows. Sarvata dvamsa rahitam satyapi dvamsa karane yadbhava bandhanam yuno sa prema parikirtita. If there is ample reason for the dissolution of a conjugal relationship, and yet such a dissolution does not take place, such a relationship of intimate love is called pure. And Prabhupada explains, the predominated gopis were bound to Krishna in such pure love. For them, there was no question of sexual love based on sense gratification. Their only engagement in life was to see Krishna happy in all respects, regardless of their own personal interests. They dedicated their souls only for the satisfaction of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. There was not the slightest tinge of sexual love between the gopis and Krishna. The author of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita asserts with authority that sexual love is a matter of personal sense enjoyment. All the regulative principles in the Vedas pertaining to desires for popularity, fatherhood, wealth, and so on are different phases of sense gratification. Acts of sense gratification may be performed under the cover of public welfare, nationalism, religion, altruism, ethical codes, biblical codes, health directives, fruitive action, bashfulness, tolerance, personal comfort, liberation from material bondage, progress, family affection, or fear of social ostracism or legal punishment. But all these categories are different subdivisions of one substance, sense gratification. All such good acts are performed basically for one's own sense gratification, for no one can sacrifice his personal interest while discharging these much advertised moral and religious principles. But above all this is a transcendental stage in which one feels himself to be only an eternal servitor of Krishna, the absolute personality of Godhead. All acts performed in this sense of servitude are called pure love of God, because they are performed for the absolute sense gratification of Sri Krishna. However, any act performed for the purpose of enjoying its fruits or results is an act of sense gratification. Such actions are visible sometimes in gross and sometimes in subtle forms. So the next verse says, the object of lust is only the enjoyment of one's own senses, but love caters to the enjoyment of Lord Krishna, and thus it is very powerful. And finally, social customs, spiritual injunctions, bodily demands, fruitive action, shyness, patience, bodily pleasures, self-gratification, and the path of Varnashram Dharma, which is difficult to give up. The gopis have forsaken all these, as well as their own relatives and their punishment and scolding, for the sake of serving Lord Krishna. They render loving service to him for the sake of his enjoyment. That is called firm attachment to Lord Krishna. It is spotlessly pure, like a clean cloth that has no stain. And Prabhupada finally writes, the author of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita advises everyone to give up all engagements of sense gratification and, like the gopis, dovetail oneself entirely with the will of the Supreme Lord. That is the ultimate instruction of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. We should be prepared to do anything and everything to please the Lord, even at the risk of violating the Vedic principles or ethical laws. That is the standard of love of Godhead. Such activities in pure love of Godhead are as spotless as white linen and have been completely washed. Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur warns us in this connection that we should not mistakenly think that the idea of giving up everything implies the renunciation of duties necessary in relation to the body and mind. Even such duties are not sense gratification if they are undertaken in a spirit of service to Krishna. Well, this is very confidential knowledge. Why is it called confidential knowledge? Because most people, even hearing this, even studying it, cannot do it. And because they cannot do it, they're not able to understand it. Even they hear it, they study it, they can even pass tests. But still, they cannot do it, nor can they really understand it. So, what helps a person understand this? Well, it's complete surrender to Krishna. Just like Arjuna had to completely surrender to Krishna. What does that mean? He had to do some things that he enjoys doing, and he had to do most things that he doesn't enjoy doing normally in material life. So he did not enjoy fighting against his own relatives, right? But see, that's called sense gratification. He had an attachment to be good, but that's another type of sense gratification. He had an attachment to follow all the regulative principles, but that can be also another type of sense gratification, you see. So not following the principles or following the principles without understanding their purpose is simply for the sake of following them. So no one can fake love of Krishna because it's absolute surrender to the will of the Lord. So there are very few people that can do that. Prabhupada was one person who could do it. He sacrificed everything to spread Krishna consciousness throughout the world, like Lord Chaitanya prophesied, and his guru wanted that, right? So he was the only one of his godbrothers who was able to do it. And he had close to 10,000 godbrothers. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur initiated almost or around 10,000 disciples. Prabhupada himself initiated about 4,500 disciples, right? So out of so many disciples, he was the only one who was actually able to do what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur told him to do. Not that the other ones didn't do anything. Yeah, they did things, but they stayed more or less in their comfort zone. Prabhupada went way out of his comfort zone, risked his life, and his life was on the brink many times in those 11 years that he preached in the West. But he never wavered. Sometimes he may have had some doubts, but he didn't waver in his determination to continue and do as much as he could to serve his guru's mission. So the same story is there in Arjuna. He didn't want to fight in the battle of Kurukshetra, but yet when he understood what is the higher duty in life, and that is to strictly follow Krishna's desire, then he was able to do things. But see, we also learn that the purity of the gopis is even superior to that of Arjuna's purity. So, and because of that, the gopis were able to achieve what's called oneness with Krishna. So what does that mean? So we read that yesterday in Bhisma Pitamaha's realization while he was leaving his body, and it says, the relation of the Lord with Arjuna is undoubtedly praiseworthy for devotees like Bhismadeva. But the relation of the gopis with the Lord is still more praiseworthy because of their still more purified loving service. By the grace of the Lord, Arjuna was fortunate enough to have the fraternal service of the Lord as chariot driver. But the Lord did not reward Arjuna with equal strength. The gopis, however, practically became one with the Lord by attainment of equal footing with the Lord. Bhisma's aspiration to remember the gopis is a prayer to have their mercy also at the last stage of his life. The Lord is satisfied more when his pure devotees are glorified, and therefore Bhisma Deva has not only glorified the acts of Arjuna, his immediate object of attraction, but has also remembered the gopis who were endowed with unrivaled opportunities for rendering loving service to the Lord. The gopis' equality with the Lord should never be misunderstood to be like the Sayuja liberation of the impersonalists. So when we say the gopis became one with Krishna, it's not the same as merging into the impersonal Brahma Jyoti. The equality is one of perfect ecstasy, where the differential conception is completely eradicated, for the interests of the lover and the beloved become identical. So when it says a differential conception is completely eradicated, this is a very profound statement by Prabhupada. But because he uses a big word like differential, it gets a little, it might not be clear what he's talking about. I mean, it's crystal clear if you understand the meaning of the words, but what it's saying basically is that the gopis don't become Krishna, but they attain a perfect state of ecstasy. And what is the cause of their ecstasy? The fact that Krishna is happy. And he's feeling ecstasy also by the service of the gopis. They don't try to better Krishna. Their only desire is to please Krishna. And at one point, Krishna tells them, you know, I want to reciprocate with you, but your service is you're so surrendered to me that I'm incapable of reciprocating with you. So, in other words, Krishna is capable of doing anything, but the surrender of the gopis to the Lord's will and the excellence of their service to please him is only achieved because they have no desire for their own sense gratification. Their only desire is purely to please Krishna. And because of that, they feel transcendental ecstasy on the same level as the Lord. Or as it says here, the equality between the gopis and the Lord is one of perfect ecstasy, where the differential conception, in other words, the gopis have a body, Krishna has a body, but they both forget that they have a body or that they're identifying with. They merge in their transcendental ecstasy together. Okay, now what does that mean exactly? Well, I mean, we might express it with words, but we would have to experience it to actually know what it means, right? But the point is, if we follow Krishna consciousness, everything is possible. Every channel is open to us. If it just depends on our degree of surrender to the Lord. Yeyatamam prapadyante tam stataiva bhajamyamam mamavart manavartante manushyaparta sarvasaha. So in the fourth chapter, Krishna explains this essential verse where he says that Yeyatamam prapadyante, as one surrenders unto me, I proportionately reveal myself to the devotee. So everything depends on our degree of surrender. And we can see that there are different degrees of surrender amongst devotees. Whenever, so Krishna says, one second, just exactly read the translation. So, as all surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Prita. So that's the translation in the Bhagavad Gita. But in other places, Prabhupada speaks to this also. He says, in Srimad Bhagavatam introduction, the Lord responds to the proportion of the devotee's love for him. And in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.8.17 he says, the Lord reciprocates the dependence of the devotee. And in a letter to, on May 20th, 1970, to Tejas Prabhu, Prabhupada writes, the Lord will reveal himself to you in proportion to your sincere efforts to satisfy him only. So we see, this is a very profound verse. The translation is only a few words, but they're very powerful words. And it's all up to us, how much we want to surrender to Guru and Krishna. And every one of us has to make that decision. But what happens is that it's not simply following all the rules and regulations. Yes, that is absolutely necessary, especially in the neophyte stages. But it's more than that. Just like there is a certain relationship with Narayana on the Vaikuntha planets, but that's a reverential relationship, and it's formalized. But when we come to Goloka Vrindavan, all that formality goes away because of pure love, unadulterated pure love for Krishna. So this is a subject that little by little we have to think about and realize as time goes on. Okay, so stop right there. And we see this prayer, this Ante Narayana, this is actually a prayer, the highest perfection of human life achieved either by complete knowledge of matter and spirit, by practice of mystic powers, or by perfect discharge of occupational duty, is to remember the personality of Godhead at the end of life. So, this remembering Krishna, or Ante Narayana Smriti, is something we should prepare ourselves for throughout life. We cannot do it accidentally or even in a planned way after having a whole life of sense gratification. It's impossible. We will not be able to remember Krishna at the moment of death. We have to practice remembering him every minute of our life, so that at the end of life, it's natural to keep the mind focused on Krishna without deviating. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Any questions?
So, in the purport, Daivi Prakriti,
Yes.
and then Prabhupada refers to that as Yogamaya. And then in the 7.14 in the Bhagavad Gita, the Daivi Hiesha Gunamayi. So there he refers to the Mahamaya also as the Daivi Prakriti. Is it one is Yogamaya, one is the Mahamaya? But
Well,
are they
okay,
both
that's a good question. One second, let me just take a look here. Yeah, so there are several references. Let's see. So first of all, he says, so there's Daivi Maya, and Prabhupada says, the divine nature due to its divine connection and movement by the divine will. This is the Daivi Maya. But Daivi Prakriti, one one second. It says, Daivi Yesa Gunamai, Mama Maya Duratya, Mama Ivi Mayam Detam. So you're talking about 714, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So here he's talking about Daivi Maya. And the Daivi Maya is the transcendental state. Okay, so let me just look at the purport you referred to that I read. It's 19, what is it? Hmm.
1940.
1940, right? Yeah. No, it's not 1940. It's not 1940. Okay, look, let me answer that. I have that. I want to take my time and answer it. The Daivi Maya means nature's stringent laws that are impossible to overcome. And that's what the Daiva Maya that's referred to in the 714. It says, Daivihi Esa Gunamai. So he connects the word Daiva to Mai. And that he's talking about his transcendental, his divine nature, or nature's stringent laws that are impossible to overcome. And in the morning walk also, walk number 14, what does Prabhupada say? He says that it's impossible to conquer nature, birth, death, old age, and disease, but it is possible by surrendering to Krishna. You can't conquer it by... So this Daiva Maya represents the stringent laws of material nature that are impossible to overcome. So that's why he says, this divine energy of mind, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. But your question is not concerned with this Daiva Maya. Your question is concerned with Daivi Prakriti.
Yeah, this is in Chaitanya Charitamrita 4, Adilila 430.
Okay, yeah, that's right. Exactly right. So, 430, he's talking about, Daivi Prakriti or Yoga Maya, right?
And
That's different than the Daivi Maya.
I think he says here, Prabhupada says, the Bhagavad Gita states that the devotees of the highest grade are under the care of Daiva Maya or Yoga Maya.
Yes.
He's equating both. So is there
The Daiva, he says Daiva Maya?
Yeah, it's under the second paragraph.
Oh yeah, okay. So he says, the Bhagavad Gita states that devotees of the highest grade are under the care of Daiva Maya or Yoga Maya. Okay. And here, so there's a difference between Daiva Maya and Daiva Mai. It says Guna Mai. So it's when it says Mai, it's talking about the three modes of material nature. And when it says Daiva Maya, it's talking about, you have to look at if the A is long or short. If it's, if one A, there are two A's in Maya. If one is short and the other is long, it's not the same as when the two A's are long. When the two A's are long, it's referring to Yoga Maya. Those under the spell of the material energy cannot at all appreciate the activities of Yoga Maya. Okay, and the sentence that you're referring to is the Bhagavad Gita states that the devotees of the highest grade are under the care of Daiva Maya. So that's a different verse, 9:13. Daivamaya. With Mahatmanas tumam parta, daivim pakritim asritaha. Bhajanti ananya manasa. So that verse, 9:13. Gatva bhutadim avyayam. So there he's talking about daivim prakritim. And that is the protection of the divine nature, or yogamaya. So when it's daivi, when it says here, daiva maya, that is referring to yogamaya. And when it says in 7:14, daivihi esa guna mayi, right? That's referring to the three modes of material nature, and there are stringent laws of nature that are impossible to overcome. So there's a difference between daiva maya and guna mayi, okay, or daiva mayi, right? So one is referring to 7:14, and the other is referring to 9:13. So 1913, you're talking about yogamaya, that actually is protecting, devotees, pure devotees who are under the spell of the supreme, under the spell of yogamaya.
And then even 7:25, Lord Krishna refers to how he's covered by the yogamaya.
Yes.
So is it
Yogamaya is also synonymous with the Brahma Jyoti, because the Brahma Jyoti is a blinding light. So therefore that has to be taken away so that we can see Krishna. Say Hiranmayana patrena satyasya piyatam mukham tatvam pusam apavrinu satyadharmaya dristaya. So that's also quoted in 7:15, right? Where's that? 7:15.
That's in Isopanishad?
Isopanishad, mantra 15. So it says, let me see where that is. Anyway,
can it also be understood as same Daivi Maya, but when it is under the influence of the Lord, it works differently versus for the conditional living entities, it's Mahamaya versus.
Okay, let's finish this discussion tomorrow.
Okay.
All right. I don't want to go into what it may or may not mean. So the 15th mantra says, O my Lord, sustainer of all that lives, your real face is covered by your dazzling effulgence. Kindly remove that covering and exhibit yourself to your pure devotee. And Prabhupada explains, in the Bhagavad Gita 14:27, the Lord explains his personal rays, Brahma Jyoti, the dazzling effulgence of his personal form in this way. I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness. Okay, so now if you go to 7. 7:25, okay, and you look in the purport, it quotes the same verse from the Ishopanishad. And it says in the second paragraph of that purport, O my Lord, you are the maintainer of the entire universe, and devotional service to you is the highest religious principle. Therefore, I pray that you will always maintain me. Your transcendental form is covered by the Yogamaya. The Brahma Jyoti is the covering of the internal potency. You say, May you kindly remove this glowing effulgence that impedes my seeing your Satchitananda Vigraha, your eternal form of bliss and knowledge. And then he says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead in its transcendental form of bliss and knowledge is covered by the internal potency of the Brahma Jyoti, and the less intelligent impersonalists cannot see the Supreme on this account. So there's a direct correspondence between Yoga Maya and the Brahma Jyoti, right? Which like hides Krishna's personal form from the eyes of non-devotees. So the impersonalists are an example of non-devotees. So they're not able to, they're blinded by the Brahma Jyoti. However, the Yoga Maya potency protects the devotees also. And that's what 9.13 says, that the Bhagavad Gita states that the devotees of the highest grade are under the care of Daiva Maya, or Yoga Maya. Mahatmanastamam Partha, Daivim Prakritim Asrita. So they're equating Daiva Maya with Daivim Prakriti. This divine energy of the Lord. Okay. So we'll continue that discussion tomorrow. I'll have a little more information for you. Okay. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. That was a good question.
Okay.
If we don't clear these points up, you can go 20 years, 30 years not understanding and make mistakes all along the way. Shri Guru Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma Pandomui Savadana Mate Pandomuhi Savadana Mate Janara Prasade Bhai E Bhavatori Ajaye Krishna Prapti Hoya Hoite Krishna Prapti Hoya Hoite Guru Mukha Padma Vaikya Chitete Koriya Kya Arana Koriya Manaya Sa Orana Koriya Manaya Sa Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttama Gati. E prasade pure sarva sai. E prasade pure sarva sai. Sudana dila jay janme janme Prabhu se. Divya gyan nirde prakasito. Divya gyan nirde prakasito. Bhakti jaha hoite avidya vinasajate. Prema bhakti jaha hoite avidya vinasajate. Vedega janara charito. Vedega janara charito. Prema bhakti Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu. Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu. Lokenata lokera jivana. Lokenat lokera jivana. Ha ha Prabhu kora doya deha mori padachaya. Ha ha Prabhu Koranoya Deha More Padachaya. Ebe Yasagusuk Jibuvana. Ebe Yasagusuk Jibuvana. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namah. Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Vaskya Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vindam Jaya Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gora Hari Bol, Gora Hari Bol, Nitai Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gora Hari, Nitai Gora Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gora Hari Bol. Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Gora Hari Bol, Nitai Gora Hari Bol. Tagore Premanandi ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa Parvajikachasta Tarasatarashi, Shishimari's Divine Grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaura Bhaktavinda ki jai. Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Samakunda Radha Kundagiri Govardhan ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Shri Mayapur Dham ki jai, Shri Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai, Tulasi Devi ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Ganga Maya ki jai, Jamuna Maya ki jai, Samaveda Bhaktavinda ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the symbol devotees. All glories to the symbol. All glories to the symbol. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Patita Pavana ki jai. The lotus feet of our spiritual master, the only way by which we can attain the pure devotion service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By His grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from His lotus mouth. Attachment to His lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From Him ecstatic prema emanates. By Him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of His character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and Lord and master of devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread throughout all the three worlds. We take shelter of your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavan Ki Jai.